I remember standing on my sister Megan's balcony, watching the lights of the city flicker like distant stars. The air was cool, tinged with the faint smell of blooming jasmine from the garden below. It was the night before her wedding, and I had volunteered to help set up the guest tables, a small task really, but one that had me staying late. As I leaned against the railing, I thought about how different our lives had always been. Megan had always been the one who shone brighter, the golden child. I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the one who never quite fit into the family's glossy, picture-perfect narrative. Megan was 2 years older, but it felt like she had a decade's head start in life. At 30, she had a husband-to-be, a sprawling house with polished marble floors, and a social circle that buzzed with influencers and entrepreneurs. I, on the other hand, was 28, still renting a small apartment, working a steady but unremarkable job, and often finding myself the odd one out at family gatherings. Our parents had always been proud of her, their voices lifting when they spoke her name, while mine was usually a footnote in conversations. That night, as I laid out the name cards and adjusted the centerpieces, I heard Megan's laugh echo through the hallway. It was that effortless, champagne glass, clinking kind of laugh that drew people in. She entered the room, wine glass in hand, her fiancé Kyle trailing behind her, looking polished and perfect in his tailored shirt and crisp slacks. "Hey Alex, you're still here?" she asked, her tone dripping with the kind of surprise that made my chest tighten a little. "Yeah, just finishing up," I replied, trying to sound casual. She glanced at the neatly arranged tables and the flickering candles I had just lit. "Oh, you don't have to do all this. We have people for that." She waved her hand dismissively, taking another sip of her wine. Kyle chuckled, leaning in to whisper something to her, his hand lightly brushing her waist. They shared a brief, knowing smile before looking back at me. "You're coming tomorrow, right?" Megan asked, tilting her head slightly as if there was a real chance I might skip my own sister's wedding. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." "Good," she said, her eyes drifting over my outfit, a simple button-up and jeans. "Just try not to wear something too understated." She let out a small airy laugh, the kind that people use when they want to seem playful, but are really just cutting you down a little. I felt the sting of it, a sharp, familiar ache, but I let it pass. I had gotten good at that over the years, letting things pass. As they left the room, their laughter echoing down the hall, I turned back to the table settings, adjusting a slightly tilted glass and straightening a place card. I could feel the weight of 1,000 small slights settling on my shoulders, each one a reminder that I was always the side character in their lives, the one they never quite took seriously. Later that night, as I drove back to my apartment, the city lights blurring past my windows, I thought about my place in this family. I had always been the one who showed up, who quietly supported everyone else without asking for much in return. I brought the gifts they never opened, laughed at the jokes that stung a little too sharply, and clapped for the achievements they never seemed to notice I had too. But something about that night felt different. Maybe it was the way Megan had looked at me, like I was a guest at her show, a distant relative, instead of her only brother. Or maybe it was the way Kyle had chuckled his arm around her, his eyes scanning the room like he owned it all, including the people in it. I parked outside my building, the engine still humming beneath my hands, and stared at the flickering streetlight that cast long shadows across the pavement. For the first time in years, I felt the slow, creeping realization that maybe I had let this go on for too long. That maybe, just maybe, I had been too willing to accept my role as the outsider, the afterthought. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air biting at my skin, and locked the door behind me. As I walked up the creaking steps to my apartment, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a long time. A quiet, simmering defiance. Maybe it was time to stop playing my part in their perfect little picture. The morning of Megan's wedding dawned with the kind of bright, flawless sky that only seems to exist in romance movies. The beachside venue she'd chosen shimmered with early sunlight, the waves in the distance gently crashing against the shore, sending a salty breeze through the air. I arrived early, my navy suit neatly pressed, a simple but thoughtful gift tucked under my arm, a framed photograph of the two of us as kids taken during one of our rare, genuinely happy summers at our grandparents' cabin by the lake. I had planned to give it to her before the chaos of the day fully took over, hoping for a small, genuine moment before the cameras started flashing and the champagne started flowing. But when I reached the bridal suite, I found the door slightly ajar, the sound of hurried whispers slipping through the crack. I hesitated hand halfway to the door when I heard my mother's voice, sharp, polished and dripping with the kind of controlled anxiety she saved for high-stakes social events. "Alex is just different," she said, her tone clipped. "He never really fit in with us. Megan, you know that. Just be polite, thank him for whatever he brought, and then focus on the people who really matter today." I felt my fingers tighten around the gift, the polished wood frame pressing uncomfortably into my palm. Megan's voice came next, softer but no less pointed. "I know, Mom. I just don't want him making things awkward. He has this way of bringing the energy down, you know, like he's always waiting for a moment that isn't about him." A tight, humorless laugh from my mother. "Exactly. Today is about you, Megan. Don't let anyone steal that spotlight." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I took a step back, letting the door drift shut as I turned away, my feet moving on instinct down the hall, away from the suite, and the small, cruel truths hanging in the air like stray threads. I made my way to the groom's side of the venue, where the groomsmen were already clinking glasses of whiskey and adjusting their cufflinks, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. Kyle saw me first, his face splitting into a wide grin. "Alex, you made it, man." He crossed the room in a few long strides, pulling me into a quick, firm hug that smelled of expensive cologne and aged whiskey. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, forcing a smile as he slapped my back with a little too much enthusiasm. "Good, good," he said, his eyes already flicking back to his groomsmen. "Hey, grab a drink, loosen up a bit. It's a party after all." I nodded, stepping aside as he rejoined his friends, their conversation quickly shifting back to old college stories and whispered jokes about the bridesmaids. I found a seat by the window, the glass cool against my back as I watched the waves roll in each one, a quiet, rhythmic reminder of time slipping away. As the ceremony drew closer, the guests began to fill the beachside pavilion, their laughter and excited chatter rising like the tide. I watched as Megan made her grand entrance, her white dress flowing behind her like a wave, her smile perfectly practiced for the cameras lining the aisle. I clapped along with the rest, my face a mask of calm, even as my mind replayed my mother's words on a loop. He never really fit in. The ceremony itself was beautiful, a textbook example of beachside romance. Vows whispered over the sound of crashing waves, rings exchanged with shaky hands and teary eyes, a kiss sealed under a fluttering arch of white roses. But when it came time for the speeches at the reception, the first real crack in the polished facade of the day appeared. Megan's best friend Katie took the microphone first, launching into a long, slightly tipsy toast about how Megan had always been the star of every room, the light that drew everyone in. "Megan," she said, swaying a little, as the crowd cheered. "You've always known what you want, and you've never let anyone stand in your way. Not your parents, not your friends, not even your little brother." Laughter rippled through the crowd, the kind that only comes from the slightly uncomfortable recognition of a truth everyone would rather ignore. I felt my jaw tighten, my fingers curling into the crisp linen napkin in my lap as the room around me blurred slightly. I forced myself to breathe, to release my grip and smile as the cameras panned over the tables, catching every reaction, every forced laugh, every tight-lipped smile. When it was finally my turn to speak, I felt every eye in the room land on me, the quiet expectation settling over the crowd like a heavy blanket. I stood, my heart thudding loudly in my chest as I took the microphone from the MC. Clearing my throat, I forced a small, shaky smile. To Megan and Kyle, I began, my voice echoing a little in the high-ceilinged pavilion. May you always find joy in each other's company, and may the love you share today carry you through every storm. I paused, my eyes finding Megan's across the room. She was smiling, her head tilted slightly, her hands wrapped around Kyle's arm like a lifeline. I forced my voice to stay steady, the words coming out smoother than I felt. And may you both always remember, I continued, my voice dropping slightly, that family isn't just about the people who share your name, but the ones who stand by you when the lights are off and the cameras are gone. A few scattered claps, a couple of awkward coughs. I handed the microphone back to the MC and sat down, my pulse still racing as the room quickly moved on the next speech, rising to fill the uneasy silence I had left behind. As the night wore on and the crowd grew louder, I found myself drifting to the edge of the party, my back against a cool, salt-crusted pillar as I watched the waves crash against the shore, each one a reminder of the distance between us, a distance that no amount of smiling photos or clinking glasses could ever truly bridge. The weeks following Megan's wedding felt like the calm before a storm I hadn't even realised was building. I went back to my routine, long hours at work, quiet nights at my apartment, and the occasional text exchange with Amara, my fiancée. She had sensed something off at the wedding, even though I hadn't told her about the conversation I overheard or the stiff, detached way my mother had hugged me at the reception. Amara and I had been together for 4 years, and despite our different backgrounds, her a confident, self-made designer with a knack for turning ideas into reality, and me a quieter, more reserved software analyst, we fit together in a way that just made sense. She was my balance, my grounding force, the one person who made me feel seen in a world that often ignored my presence. One evening, as we sat on our small balcony, the city lights stretching out before us like a carpet of stars, she turned to me, her dark eyes catching the soft glow of the patio lanterns. "Something's bothering you," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You've been distant since the wedding." I sighed, leaning back in my chair, the metal cool against my shoulders. "It's nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just work stress." She didn't buy it, of course. She never did. "Alex," she pressed her hand, finding mine on the small glass table between us. "I know you better than that. What's really going on?" I hesitated, my eyes tracing the faint trails of condensation on my beer bottle. I had always been the quiet one, the one who let things slide, who swallowed hurt and brushed off insults like they were part of the air I breathed. But this time, something felt different. The words from that morning outside Megan's bridal suite still echoed in my mind. He never really fit in. I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening around the cool glass. "It's just my family," I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. "I heard some things at the wedding, things that made me realize how they really see me." She tilted her head, her grip on my hand tightening slightly. "What kind of things?" I met her eyes, the warmth in them cutting through the tightness in my chest. "They think I'm a burden, an outsider, someone they tolerate because they have to, not because they want to." Amara's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening just enough for me to notice. She had always been fiercely protective of the people she loved, and I knew the idea of someone treating me like an afterthought hit a nerve for her. "Alex," she said, her voice low but sharp, "you're not a burden. You've never been a burden. If they can't see your worth, that's their problem, not yours." I felt a small, bitter laugh slip past my lips. Maybe. But it still stings, you know, to hear your own family talk about you like you're just there, like you're some shadow they have to deal with. She leaned in closer, her eyes never leaving mine. Then stop letting them make you feel small. Stop giving them the power to define who you are. I nodded her words, sinking into my mind, like the first drops of rain before a storm. But it was easier said than done. Years of being sidelined, of playing the quiet, reliable brother, had etched deep lines into my sense of self. Changing that wouldn't happen overnight. A few days later, I got a call from Megan. Her voice was as bright and airy as ever, the kind of tone she reserved for social gatherings and brunch with her close friends, most of whom she talked about behind their backs. "Hey, little brother," she said, dragging out the last word like it was an inside joke. "I need a favour." I leaned back in my office chair, the hum of my computer screen a dull background to her too cheerful voice. "What's up?" "Kyle and I are thinking of upgrading the guest house." She said, her words tumbling over each other in that breathless way she had when she wanted something. You know, make it a little more presentable for when his clients visit. But we're kind of stretched thin right now with the wedding bills and the honeymoon, so I was wondering if you could, help us out a bit. I felt my jaw tighten, a familiar heavy pressure settling in my chest. "Help you out, how?" "Oh, she said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "A small loan, just to cover some of the renovations until things settle down. You're good with finances, right? I'm sure you can spare a little for family." I let the silence stretch between us, the quiet hum of my office suddenly feeling deafening. I thought about the countless times I had quietly supported my family, the birthday gifts they never unwrapped, the holidays where my name was left off the place cards, the years of showing up for them without ever really being seen. "Let me think about it," I finally said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. "Oh, come on, Alex," she laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "Don't be like that, we're family." I felt something snap in my chest, a small brittle piece of myself breaking free. "Yeah," I replied, my voice low and steady. "We are. That's why I need to think about it." I hung up before she could reply, my heart pounding in my ears, the anger simmering just beneath my skin. I closed my laptop, my fingers shaking slightly as I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. For the first time in years, I felt the slow, unmistakable stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a long time. The urge to stand my ground, to push back, to remind myself that I was more than just a shadow in their picture-perfect lives. As I sat there, my pulse slowly settling back into its normal rhythm, I realized something important. I had spent years being their silent supporter, their forgotten sibling, their convenient afterthought. But maybe it was time to stop being the quiet one. A few weeks after Megan's thinly veiled request for money, I found myself standing in line at the local coffee shop. The rich, bitter scent of freshly ground beans wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. It had become a small ritual for me. Grabbing a coffee before heading into the office, a brief moment of peace before the chaos of the day took over. As I scrolled through my emails, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Amara, a simple text that made my heart skip a beat. "Amara, dinner tonight, we need to talk." I felt my chest tighten, a dozen possibilities flashing through my mind. We had been talking about wedding plans recently, debating everything from guest lists to venue options, and I knew the pressure of it all had been weighing on her. Still, her message had an ominous undertone, the kind that made my pulse quicken. I typed a quick reply, my fingers moving faster than my thoughts. "Me, of course, 7 at our usual place." She replied almost instantly. "Amara, perfect, see you then." I pocketed my phone, my mind already racing through the possible topics she might bring up. Had I done something wrong? Had she sensed the distance I had been putting between myself and my family, or worse? Had Megan somehow managed to pull Amara into her web of quiet manipulations? The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and project updates, my focus shattered by the nagging worry that had taken root in my mind. By the time I arrived at the restaurant, a cosy, dimly lit Italian place we had been going to since our second date, my nerves were frayed. Amara was already there, her long dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail, her fingers wrapped around the stem of a half-empty wine glass. She looked up as I approached her eyes, catching the soft glow of the overhead lights, and offered me a small, tight smile. "Hey," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice a little too calm, a little too controlled. We ordered quickly, the menus set aside like the unspoken tension that hung between us. I watched as she took another sip of her wine, her fingers tapping lightly against the glass as she gathered her thoughts. Finally, she set the glass down and leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "Alex," she began, her voice low but steady, "we need to talk about your family." I felt my heart drop, the words hitting me like a cold wave. I had known this conversation was coming, had felt it building in the quiet moments we shared at home, in the way she sometimes looked at me with a mixture of worry and frustration. "What about them?" I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her glass. "I've tried to stay out of it," she continued, her voice soft but firm. "I've tried to let you handle it your way, but, Alex, it's eating you alive." I opened my mouth to protest, to brush off her concern like I always had, but the words stuck in my throat. "They use you," she said, her voice gaining strength as she leaned in closer, her dark eyes never leaving mine. "They take you for granted, they treat you like a backup plan, and you just let them." I felt my jaw tighten, the familiar mix of shame and anger rising in my chest. "It's not that simple," I said, my voice a harsh whisper. "They're my family." Her eyes softened, her hand reaching across the table to cover mine. "Family doesn't make you feel like this, Alex. Family doesn't drain you or belittle you or make you feel like you're less than you are." I looked down at our joined hands, the warmth of her touch cutting through the cold knot of anxiety in my chest. I don't want to lose them," I admitted, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. She sighed, her grip tightening. "But you're losing yourself, Alex. You're letting them define who you are, and it's breaking you." I felt the sting of her words, each one hitting a raw nerve I had been trying to ignore for years. She was right, of course. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a family that saw me as little more than a convenient afterthought, a background character in their carefully curated lives. As our food arrived, the warm, rich smells of pasta and garlic filling the small space between us, I felt a slow, simmering resolve settle into my bones. I had spent too long letting my family dictate my worth, too long playing the quiet, supportive brother who never rocked the boat. As the dinner wound down and we made our way back to our apartment, I felt a strange, unfamiliar lightness in my chest, a small, fragile ember of defiance that I hadn't felt in years. Later that night, as we lay side by side in the dark, Amara's head resting on my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck, I whispered the words I had been too afraid to say for so long. "You're right," I said, my voice barely more than a breath. "I can't keep living like this. I can't keep letting them control me." She tightened her hold on me, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as she whispered back, "I'll be here whatever you decide. You're not alone in this." And in that moment, as I closed my eyes and let the steady rhythm of her heartbeat lull me to sleep, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long, long time: hope. The final straw came on a grey, rain-soaked afternoon, the kind where the world feels smaller, the air heavy with the promise of something about to break. I had just wrapped up a long, draining day at work when my phone buzzed, the sharp vibration cutting through the quiet hum of my car's engine. It was Megan. I hesitated for a moment, my fingers hovering over the screen, the memories of our last conversation still fresh in my mind. I let the call go to voicemail, my pulse quickening as I watched the screen flash, then go dark again. I sat there for a long moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel, the rain drumming against the windshield in a steady, unrelenting rhythm. Finally, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever fresh guilt trip or thinly veiled demand she had prepared, and played the message. "Hey, Alex," her voice crackled through the speaker, a little too bright, a little too forced. "I'm just calling to check in. I know we haven't talked much since the wedding, and I don't want you to feel left out." I felt my jaw clench, the familiar knot of resentment tightening in my chest. She continued, her tone shifting to something a bit more guarded, a bit more calculated. "Mom mentioned that you seemed a little distant lately. She's worried about you, you know. We all are. Family is supposed to stick together, and it feels like you've been pulling away." I leaned back against the headrest, my eyes slipping closed as her words washed over me, each one a carefully crafted reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. "I know things have been complicated," she went on, her voice softening to a carefully measured note of concern. "But if you're struggling, you can always come to us. We're family. We take care of each other." The words hit me like a cold wave, each one dripping with the kind of shallow, performative empathy that had defined our relationship for as long as I could remember. She paused, her breath crackling through the line like a distant storm. "Anyway, call me back when you get a chance. I miss you, little brother." The message ended with a sharp click, the silence that followed feeling heavier than the rain-slicked air around me. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling beneath my feet, the windshield wipers slicing back and forth in a slow, steady rhythm. And then, without really thinking, I hit the call button. The line rang twice before she picked up, her voice bright and cheerful, as if she hadn't just left a carefully rehearsed guilt trip on my voicemail. "Alex," she chirped, her voice slicing through the static like a knife. "I was just thinking about you." I felt my fingers tighten around the steering wheel, the leather cool and smooth beneath my palms. "Yeah, I got your message," I said, my voice steady, my pulse pounding in my ears. "And I've been thinking too." She hesitated, the briefest flicker of uncertainty slipping into her tone. "Oh, about what?" "About family," I replied, my voice low, and even each word carefully measured. "About what it really means to stand by someone, to support them, to actually care." There was a beat of silence, the kind that stretched thin and brittle across the distance between us like a thread pulled too tight. "Of course we care about you, Alex," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "You're my brother." I let out a slow, bitter laugh, the sound harsh and unfamiliar in the quiet confines of my car. "Am I?" I shot back the words, tumbling out before I could stop them. "Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like it." She sputtered, the polished, confident tone she always wore, like armour cracking around the edges. What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the years I spent being your backup plan, your convenient +1, your quiet, reliable brother, who never asks for anything, never rocks the boat." I felt my pulse racing, my hands shaking slightly, as the words poured out, years of bottled-up frustration and resentment finally spilling over. "I'm talking about the countless family gatherings where I was an afterthought, the forgotten sibling at the back of every photo, the one you never quite knew what to do with." She started to speak, her voice sharp and defensive, but I cut her off, the floodgates fully open now. "I'm done, Megan," I said, my voice low but steady. The words coming out like a final, irrevocable decision. "I'm done being the quiet one, the one who swallows every slight, who plays along with your perfect curated family image. I'm done pretending that I don't see the way you treat me, the way you all treat me." There was a long, echoing silence on the other end of the line, the kind that felt like the world holding its breath, waiting for something to break. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight, each word carefully controlled. "Fine." She snapped the carefully constructed facade of sisterly concern, shattering in an instant. "If that's how you feel, then maybe you should just stay away. Maybe you should just stop trying to be part of this family if it's so damn hard for you." I felt a cold, hollow ache settle into my chest, the final unspoken truth hanging between us like the sharp edge of a blade. "Maybe I should," I replied, my voice low and steady, my fingers finally releasing their death grip on the steering wheel. And then before she could reply, before she could find a way to twist the knife one last time, I ended the call, my thumb hovering over the screen for a moment before I blocked her number. I sat there for a long time, the rain still tapping against the windshield, the engine still humming beneath me, the world outside my car feeling sharper, clearer, more alive than it had in years. As I pulled back onto the road, the wipers cutting a clear path through the rain-streaked glass, I felt a strange, unfamiliar lightness in my chest, the kind that comes from finally letting go. Story 2. You know those stories that start off sounding too ridiculous to be true? Yeah, this one's mine. I'm Lena Moore. I'm 27, work full-time in tech live on my own, and take pride in being financially independent. I don't live lavishly, but I have stability, which is more than I can say for most people my age, especially my family. My younger sister Kayla is 22. She's a professional dependent, I guess. Never held a job, never paid rent, and definitely never learned how to hear no. She lives at home and still acts like the world owes her a vacation every time she wakes up before noon. My parents. Let's just say they never figured out the difference between enabling and parenting. Kayla gets what she wants, always has. Me, I've been on my own since I turned 18. No loans, no help, just budgeting apps and survival instincts. But nothing prepared me for this. It started on a Monday morning. I logged into my bank accounts to check for any weird charges, a habit I picked up after a friend got skimmed at an ATM. And that's when I saw it. A pending charge for $50,000. My stomach flipped. It was on my credit card, a card I barely use. I keep it for emergencies and big purchases I pay off immediately. There's no way. I clicked into the charge, a luxury travel agency in Miami. Now, I haven't travelled since pre-COVID, and I definitely haven't dropped the equivalent of a down payment on a vacation. I sat back and stared at the screen, waiting for my brain to catch up. Then it clicked. Only 3 people know my credit card number besides me, my mom, my dad, and Kayla. I called the card company right away. After the usual security questions, I asked about the charge. Yes, Miss Moore, the agent said. That was attempted last night, but hasn't fully processed yet. I told them to block it immediately. They froze the card, started a fraud investigation, said I'd be safe from liability. And while I should have felt relief, I felt something else rage. Because I knew exactly what happened. My parents, and probably Kayla, tried to use my card to fund one of her fantasy getaways, and they hadn't even asked. They just assumed I'd never notice. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Kayla. Can't wait to be sipping mojitos on the beach while you sit at home in your sad little apartment. Must suck to be boring and broke. I blinked. She had no idea. They thought they'd gotten away with it. Oh, this was going to be fun. I didn't say anything right away. I waited. 15 minutes later, my mum called. Right on schedule? I answered deadpan. Hey, Mom. Lena, what did you do? No hi, no small talk, just instant meltdown. The payment didn't go through. The agency called. They said the card was declined. Kayla's trip is ruined. I kept my voice even. Weird. I cancelled my card this morning. Silence. You did what? I noticed an unauthorised charge for 50 grand, so I froze everything. More silence. Then the guilt trip started. We were going to pay you back. I laughed. With what exactly? The retirement fund you already spent, or the one Kayla thinks she'll inherit before you turn 60. Lena, we did this for Kayla. She's been so stressed lately. I cut her off. You mean when she told me I was pathetic for staying home while she takes luxury vacations? She's your sister, my mom snapped. You should be helping her. She's not entitled to my credit card because she's my sister. Then I heard my dad in the background. Fix this now, Lena. I sighed. Or what you'll call me names and pretend I owe you something. You're ungrateful. You have a good job. You don't even need the money. There it was, the classic you have money so it should be ours logic. Newsflash, I said, having money doesn't mean you get to take it without asking. Lena, my mom's voice cracked. You're ruining her life. No, I said calmly. You did that when you taught her that consequences don't exist. Then I hung up. About 20 minutes later, the next storm rolled in. Kayla. She called voice already at DEFCON 1. Are you out of your mind? What did you do? Hey, Kayla, enjoying your staycation? You cancelled the payment, my trip's ruined, my friends are going without me, and I've already posted about it on Instagram. I munched a granola bar and let her scream. You're so selfish, you don't even travel. You weren't using that money. I had to pause mid-chew. That's not how money works, Kayla. If you're not using it, it doesn't become community property. You just want me to suffer. No, I want you to grow up. You're a jealous loser. Click. I ended the call mid-rant. The silence was beautiful. By the next morning, I had 10 missed calls from my mum, a wall of texts from Kayla, and a voicemail from my dad that started with, "Lena, you better call me back or else..." I didn't, but they weren't done. That afternoon, my building's buzzer rang. I checked the camera, my mum and Kayla standing outside with fake smiles and dramatic body language. I opened the door just enough to speak. Oh look, it's the identity thieves. My mum pushed past me into the apartment like she still paid my rent. Kayla followed, arms crossed, scowl locked in. "Let's talk like adults," my mum said. "You mean like adults who try to steal from their kids behind their back?" "We weren't stealing," she huffed. "We were borrowing." I raised an eyebrow. "Cool. Can I borrow your mortgage next month?" "That's not the point," she snapped. Then Kayla jumped in, voice high and entitled. "Just admit you're jealous because I get to have fun and you don't." I actually laughed. "You think I'm jealous of a cancelled vacation and zero savings? You ruined everything. And I'd do it again." My mum's tone shifted cold. "You make good money. Why are you making this a big deal?" I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch. "'Cause it's not your money. You crossed a line." Kayla whined. "People are going to think I'm poor. Now I already posted about this trip." I stared. Oh no, anyway. She screamed and threw her purse at me. I dodged it easily. "You'll regret this, Lena," my mom hissed, dragging Kayla out of my apartment. I just smiled. Doubt it. I figured they'd stew in their own drama for a while. I was wrong. That night I got a fraud alert from my bank. Someone had tried to reset my online password twice. Then I got a text from Dad. "We need to talk now." I called him. "What did you do to your mother? She's been crying all day." "Probably because she got caught committing credit card fraud." "You're tearing this family apart." "No, I'm just refusing to fund it." Then I brought up the attempted hack. "Someone tried to get into my bank account tonight. That wouldn't happen to be you or your accomplices, would it?" Dead silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "Don't worry, the bank's investigating. If anything else happens, they'll press charges." He hung up. For the first time in a long time, my apartment was quiet. I'd expected the chaos to keep escalating. But after I shut down the bank fraud attempt and locked my credit, the noise stopped at least for a day. Then came the text from my aunt. "Hey Lena, just checking in. Is everything okay? Your mom's telling everyone you cut the family off and left them broke. Call me." I stared at my phone, exhaled, then called her back. Aunt Rachel is one of the few sane people in the family, my mom's older sister. She's sharp, unfiltered, and doesn't play favourites. "Let me guess," I said as soon as she answered. "Mom's in full damage control." She sighed. "Oh, you have no idea. She's calling cousins crying about how you abandoned them, told Grandma you left them financially stranded." I laughed once, bitter and short. "She left out the part where they tried to use my credit card for a 50K vacation, didn't she?" Silence. "Wait, what?" I laid it all out. The unauthorised charge, the hacking attempt, the screaming match at my apartment, all of it. By the end, Aunt Rachel was fuming. "That's disgusting. I'm calling your mom. This is crossing every line. Be my guest?" That evening things spiralled. Family group chats exploded. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly texted, just checking in. A few relatives unfollowed my mom online. One cousin sent me a thumbs up emoji with no context. But the best part, Kayla messaged me. "WTF, you told Aunt Rachel seriously?" I replied, "No, Mom did, like always." She didn't answer. Then came a message from my mom. "You've humiliated this family. We're struggling and you're sitting there laughing. How could you do this to us?" I stared at the screen, calm, unbothered. I replied, "You did this to yourself. Actions have consequences." Blocked. And yet they still weren't done. That night I got a voicemail from my dad. "Lena, call me back. It's urgent." I didn't. The next morning I checked my email. There it was, an alert from the bank. Someone had tried to open a new credit card in my name. They got denied. Even better. Since I'd already flagged their behaviour, the bank blacklisted them, which meant any future attempts dead on arrival. Checkmate. I should have felt angry. Instead I felt free. They had no power left, no access, no more games. But of course, Kayla still had one tantrum left in her. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. Didn't knock, just pounded the buzzer until I buzzed her in out of sheer curiosity. She stormed inside like she owned the place. "You ruined everything," she yelled, tossing her purse on my couch. "Grandma's mad Aunt Rachel hates us, and Mum and Dad are being treated like criminals." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I wonder why." "You could have fixed this," she screeched. "Fix what your stolen vacation, the hacked bank account, the fraud charges." She stomped her foot like a child denied dessert. "Mom said you'd come crawling back." I smirked. Guess what, she was wrong. She glared. "You're selfish, bitter, jealous." I held up a hand. "Careful, choose your next words wisely." She clenched her fists. "You're a—" "Get out." Her mouth snapped shut. I opened the door. "This isn't your stage anymore. Go scream somewhere else." She hesitated. For a second, I think she realized she had nowhere left to go. Then, without a word, she grabbed her bag and left. I locked the door, not just with a key, but in my heart too. Weeks passed. My mum tried one last sympathy campaign. She posted vague Facebook statuses about betrayal and family pain. A few people liked them. Most didn't. Kayla tried playing the victim online, claimed she was financially abused by her own sister, but the comments weren't kind. Someone shared screenshots of her bragging about the vacation online. Another posted, "Isn't this the girl who got caught trying to commit credit card fraud?" They went quiet after that. And me? I kept living. Woke up early, went to work, took evening walks, cooked real food, and felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. One night I was journaling, just sitting with my thoughts, and I wrote a single sentence that summed everything up. "I'm not the villain for setting a boundary. I'm the proof that you can break a cycle." Because that's what it was. A cycle. Of entitlement. Of guilt-tripping. Of pretending love means emptying your wallet. They pushed it as far as they could, and I pushed back, quietly, completely. They wanted access. I gave them a locked door. They wanted control. I gave them consequences. And the wildest part, I don't hate them. I just don't owe them anymore. Months passed. The kind of months that change you not loudly but slowly, like the way grass grows back after a fire. My phone stopped buzzing. No more threats, no more guilt texts, no more fake emergencies. My family had finally run out of ammo. Or maybe they just ran out of people willing to believe their version of the story. Either way, the silence, it was the best sound I'd ever heard. People always talk about how cutting ties is dramatic, that it's some big explosive moment. But the truth, it's quiet. It's walking away from a conversation before it turns into a battle. It's blocking a number, not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop answering. It's choosing peace over proximity. And I chose it every single day. In the meantime, life moved on. I got promoted, started leading my own team at work, bought a used car that didn't wheeze on hills. I planted herbs on my apartment balcony, basil, mint, rosemary. They thrived in the sunlight. I guess I did too. I didn't talk about my family much. Most people assumed I was an only child, and in a way I had been all along. One afternoon I got coffee with Aunt Rachel. She stirred her drink slowly, watching me over the rim of her cup. "They haven't called me in weeks," she said. "You know they're embarrassed." I nodded. "They should be." She chuckled, but her voice softened. "You didn't just protect yourself, Lena. You broke a cycle they didn't want to admit existed." "I didn't do it for revenge," I said. "I did it so I could sleep at night." And that was the truth. I didn't want payback. I just wanted the right to live without being punished for saying no. Around the same time, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email. A real letter with shaky handwriting on the envelope. From my grandmother. Inside 2 paragraphs written in neat cursive. "Lena, I know there's been a lot of tension in the family. I won't pretend I understand it all. But I want you to know I'm proud of you. You stood your ground. That's not easy. Especially when people you love try to guilt you into silence. I've seen it before. Your mum's hurting, but that doesn't make her right. You did what was necessary. Love, Grandma." I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I folded it neatly, tucked it into my desk drawer, and didn't cry. Not because it didn't touch me, but because it gave me something I hadn't known I needed. Permission to let go. Kayla never apologized. Not once. But I stopped waiting for it. You can waste your life hoping for people to become someone they never learned how to be. Letting go isn't weakness. It's clarity. It's saying you don't have to be the villain for me to choose distance. I don't need her to fall apart to feel okay. I just need her far enough away that I can breathe. Last week I walked past a travel agency downtown. The window display was filled with glossy beach posters, cocktails, white sand, infinity pools. The same kind of place they tried to charge to my card. I looked at it and didn't feel a thing. Not anger, not sadness, just stillness. Because that trip was never mine to take, and neither was the weight of their chaos. These days I do take trips. Not to prove a point, just because I want to. I book them with my own money. No secrets, no stolen credit cards, no drama. Just fresh air, clean sheets, a book in my bag, and a mind that isn't spinning with what-ifs. I don't post much online. No cryptic captions, no curated image. Just real life, lived quietly, lived well. I guess if you asked my parents today, they'd say I was cruel, that I overreacted, that I tore the family apart. But the truth is simple. They lit the match. I just chose not to burn with them. I don't know if I'll ever speak to them again. And honestly, I'm okay either way, because I built a life that doesn't depend on their approval. A life where my name is safe, my money is mine. And no one can guilt me into giving away pieces of myself just to make someone else feel powerful. I used to think setting boundaries meant losing people, but now I see it just shows you who was only there because you didn't have any. They tried to take $50,000 from me. Instead, I took my freedom back, and it was worth every penny. Story 3. I'm not sure when exactly I realised I wasn't really loved. Maybe it was a slow drip that built up over years, 1,000 quiet dismissals, 100 shrugged off achievements. But if I had to pick a single sentence to describe my childhood, it would be this. I was useful, not cherished. My name's Maya, I'm 27 now, and I live in a quiet corner of Oregon with a job I fought tooth and nail to earn. Peace to me is silence that doesn't feel like punishment. I grew up in suburban Illinois, the only child of 2 people who cared more about their image than they ever did about parenting. My dad, Nathan, was a corporate lawyer, polished, calculated, the kind of man who believed apologies were weaknesses. My mum, Denise, was a real estate agent, charming to strangers, icy to me. They had me young, and I never let myself forget it. I wasn't part of the plan. I was the inconvenience that never left. On the outside we were fine. Nice house, clean yard, family holiday cards in matching sweaters. But on the inside, everything felt conditional. If I got a good grade, it was expected. If I struggled, I was lazy. I was too independent, too dramatic, or too sensitive. My job was to be low maintenance. By high school, I'd stopped sharing anything meaningful with them. It was safer to keep dreams to myself. I worked after school to save for college, tutored kids, stocked shelves, babysat, and quietly applied to scholarships because I knew they wouldn't help. And then everything collapsed. Senior year, my dad lost his job. I never got the full story, just that it had to do with something political at the firm. Around the same time, my mum stopped working too. I'm still not sure if she quit or was let go. Either way, our house got tense, cold. Suddenly I wasn't just the unwanted child, I was the backup plan. I told them I'd gotten a partial scholarship to a state university. I was excited. It covered most of my tuition. I thought maybe this would make them proud. Instead, my dad asked if the money could be used for the family. My mum suggested I take a year off, get a job, help with the mortgage. Because as she said, a real adult helps their family. Then I found out the college savings account my grandfather had left me, one of the few people who actually made me feel seen, was gone. My parents had used it to cover their debts. No apology, just an explanation. We did what we had to do. I left 2 weeks later, moved to a nearby city, took every odd job I could find, waitressed until 3 a.m., then went to class at 8, rented rooms from strangers, skipped meals when my paycheck came up short. But it was my life. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to approve it. Fast forward 5 years, I graduated, moved to Oregon for a job in tech. It's not flashy, but it's stable. I live in a small apartment with plants on the windowsill. I go hiking on weekends. I have friends who ask how I'm doing and actually listen to the answer. And then last week I got a message from my parents. After years of silence, they wanted to visit. They said they'd be bringing a surprise, that I'd be so happy. Like we were a normal family just catching up after a few years apart. I stared at the message for a long time, not angry, not sad, just tired. I told them I wasn't interested in a visit, that I'd moved on and wished them well, but I didn't want contact. I said, please keep your surprise to yourself. And that's when the guilt campaign started. Aunt Melinda messaged me first. She's always been the family's designated peacemaker. She said they've changed Maya. You should give them a chance. Then came texts from cousins I hadn't seen in years, all saying the same thing, they're your parents. Everyone makes mistakes. Don't you want closure? No one asked how I felt. No one remembered the years I worked double shifts while they drained my future. No one acknowledged the silence that followed me through college like I was an embarrassment they'd left behind. They just wanted me to let it go. Then I got a call from my aunt again. She said my parents had been in therapy, that they finally saw their mistakes, that the surprise was a trust fund money they'd been setting aside as an apology. And for a second I wavered, because part of me still wants to believe they could change. But then I thought about it. Why did they think the best way to fix what they'd done was to throw money at it? They hadn't even asked what I needed. They just assumed I'd be bought, again. That night I wrote them an email. I thanked them for the effort. I said if therapy was helping, that was great. But I also explained that dropping in uninvited with a financial gesture wasn't how you rebuild trust. I told them I needed space, that I wasn't interested in money, that if they wanted a relationship, it had to start slow with communication and respect. The next day they replied. At first, it sounded okay. They said they appreciated my honesty, that they'd try to do things differently. But by the third paragraph, the tone changed. My mum wrote that family shouldn't need rules, that I was being too rigid, that real love means showing up even uninvited. My dad said he was hurt I wouldn't accept the trust fund, that I disrespected their effort, that I should stop acting like a victim. It all came rushing back, how they twisted things, how they made me feel like the problem, how they turned my independence into ingratitude. And I realised they hadn't changed. They'd just rehearsed new lines. After that last email, I hoped they'd finally get it that boundaries meant something, that my words had weight. But I should have known better. People who never listened don't suddenly start because you ask nicely. 2 days passed. Then early one morning a text came in from an unknown number. Hope you're doing well in your new city. Don't think you can hide forever. We'll see you soon. It was short, but something about it sent a cold current through my chest. It wasn't random spam. The phrasing was too familiar. My dad had always been like that, vague enough to claim innocence, sharp enough to leave a bruise. I didn't respond, but I didn't sleep well that night either. Later that day, a new email arrived from my father. Long, polished, formal. The kind of message you write when you want to sound calm, but really you're boiling just beneath the surface. He talked about disappointment, about how I was their only child, and that with that came moral obligations. He wrote, "It's time to repay the investment we made in your upbringing." Reading it made me sick. They hadn't changed. They still thought love was a transaction. That night, I called Jordan, a friend I met during college. She knew the whole story, every quiet holiday I spent alone, every panicked call during finals week, when I thought I'd lose my apartment, every birthday my parents forgot. After I read her the message, she said gently, "This isn't new, Maya. This is who they've always been. They're just louder now because they're losing control." She was right, but that didn't make it easier. A day later, I noticed something new. My parents had followed me on Instagram. I rarely posted just pictures of hikes, my plants, a few shots with friends. It was a private account. I hadn't blocked them before because they didn't use social media much. I guess that changed. My mom had even liked a post from 2 years ago, one where I stood at the edge of Crater Lake, finally at peace. The comment read, Wish we could have seen that view with you. It made my skin crawl. I changed all my settings, locked down everything. Then I got a call from my aunt again, third one this month. She said my parents were worried that they didn't know how else to reach me, that they were thinking about flying over just to talk. She said it like she was offering tea, like they weren't planning to show up uninvited at a home I never gave them the address to. I asked her straight out, how do they know where I live? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, well, you posted a picture near that bakery last year, and they asked around. So they'd been tracking me, quietly, persistently. That's when the fear really started to settle in. They weren't reaching out, they were circling. That night I wrote another email. This one was short, direct. I told them again, no visits, no surprise appearances, no more pretending this was some family drama we could hug our way through. I ended with a warning, if you show up at my home, I will call the police. The reply came fast. My mother, of course. A wall of text dripping in guilt and accusation. How could you treat us like strangers? We only ever wanted to support you. We're your parents. One day you'll regret pushing us away. You'll realize we were just trying to help. Every sentence was a knife wrapped in soft fabric. That night, I barely slept. I kept checking the front door. I made sure my phone was fully charged. I felt like I was being hunted, and the worst part was knowing the people who made me feel safest as a child were the ones doing the chasing. The next day, my apartment building's manager left a note on my door. Someone had come by, said they were visiting their daughter, asked if I lived there. The staff member didn't confirm anything, thankfully, but gave me a heads up. The man's description, mid-50s, grey coat, slight limp. My father. That moment broke something in me. All those years I thought I was free, that moving, disconnecting, building a life of my own had made me untouchable. It vanished. Just like that. They knew where I was, and they weren't going to stop until I was standing in front of them again. And what would they say if I did? Would they cry, apologize, try to hug me? Would they hold out that trust fund like it was a bouquet of roses, acting like money could undo years of silence and blame? Or would they do what they'd always done, make me feel small, ungrateful, guilty? I didn't want to find out. I called a lawyer, told her everything. She walked me through the process of filing a protective order if needed. I haven't filed yet, but I keep the paperwork ready just in case. Then I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I started planning to move, again. My lease wasn't up yet, but I knew a friend nearby whose partner was relocating. They had an apartment coming available in a few weeks. I told her I was interested, didn't give details. All I said was I need a new beginning. She understood. The hardest part of all this wasn't losing them. It was losing the hope that one day they'd understand. That one day they'd say, we hurt you. We're sorry. What do you need from us? But they never asked. They just kept showing up, uninvited, unwelcome. So I packed in silence, moved in silence, changed my number in silence. And when I locked the door to my new place, I stood there for a long time, just breathing. No knocking, no footsteps, no surveillance. Only peace. And that was enough for now. The move happened on a Thursday. I didn't tell anyone. Outside a small circle, my boyfriend, my closest friend, and my new landlord. The U-Haul was packed and gone by noon. By nightfall, I was standing in a different apartment, 2 towns over, staring at a window that framed a brand new sky. It wasn't bigger or fancier, but it was mine again. No shadows under the door, no weight in the hallway, just the creaking of floorboards and the whisper of wind. I didn't tell my parents where I'd gone. Of course not. I wasn't naive anymore. They had used every tool they had, family guilt, surprise money, even fear. They tried to turn every boundary I built into a betrayal. And now, when none of it worked, they started telling stories. I found out through my friend Ava. She had gone to a gathering, something casual, one of those small neighborhood parties where everyone brings too much wine and shares too little truth. My parents were there. I didn't know they'd be, but she told me everything afterward. They said you'd abandoned them. Ava told me, her voice low and careful, said you cut ties for no reason, that they raised you with love, and now you've turned cold. I listened in silence. Ava knew better than to sugarcoat it. They made you sound ungrateful, she added, like some spoiled girl who just wanted to hurt them. I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just felt tired. Because that was their version of love, a checklist of sacrifices framed like debts. Ava told me she'd confronted them. She didn't hold back. She told the room how they'd ignored me, drained me, used me, how they took what they wanted and then called me selfish when I finally said no. And my parents, they didn't argue. They didn't deny it. They just went quiet. For the first time, maybe they couldn't talk their way out of it. After that night, the messages kept coming, but slower now. Like they were bleeding out, losing steam. Emails, voicemails, even a few calls from blocked numbers. I stopped listening. I stopped reading. It was always the same script. We miss you. You're our daughter. This family is falling apart because of you. But by now I understood they didn't want me back. Not really. They wanted the version of me who stayed silent, the one who didn't say no. I wasn't that girl anymore. I sent them one final message. Simple, calm. If you keep contacting me or attempt to visit again, I will file a restraining order. Please do not reach out further. I didn't wait for a reply. I just blocked them across everything. And after that, silence. Not the sharp, heavy silence I grew up with. This was something else. Stillness, like a quiet forest after the storm. Broken branches, yes, but the roots remained. I was still standing. I spent the next few weeks settling into the new space. My boyfriend helped. We repainted the kitchen together. I bought a used table off Craigslist and cried happy tears the first time I cooked dinner without looking over my shoulder. I planted sage in a windowsill pot. I started sleeping better. And slowly I stopped checking the shadows. Then one afternoon, Ava called. She was calm but firm. They're telling people you threatened them, that you overreacted. They're playing the victim now. I didn't even blink. Let them, I said. That's all they have left. I knew the truth. That was enough. Let them tell whatever story they needed to save face. I wasn't in it anymore. I had rewritten my part. In my version, I got out. I built something. I didn't break a family, I broke a cycle. And maybe that's what scared them most. They always said I was too strong-willed, as if that was something to be ashamed of. But now I see it for what it was. A quiet gift. A seed planted deep. The kind that grows even in the hardest soil. That strength brought me here to a home I chose with love I built, and a life where I don't have to flinch when the phone buzzes. Sometimes I still get dreams. I wake up back in my childhood room, the walls closing in my mother's voice echoing down the hallway. But I always wake up to light, to a ceiling I chose, to a bed I earned. And I breathe in the silence like it's the first time I've heard myself think. 'Cause now no one speaks for me but me. No more guilt. No more shame. No more pretending that love is something you have to suffer for. This isn't a happy ending. This is just the middle of a better story. And I finally get to write it.